The wind howled through the jagged peaks of the iron spine, carrying with it the biting chill of winter and the stench of blood. In the dying light of the sun, the mountain pass glowed in eerie crimson, the snow stained with the remnants of battle. Bodies lay strewn across the ground, their limbs twisted in unnatural angles, their faces frozen in masks of terror. The clash of steel against steel had ceased, but the echoes of the slaughter lingered in the air, mingling with the desperate cries of the wounded. At the center of the carnage stood Rhovan, his broad chest heaving as he surveyed the aftermath. His sword, a brutal length of darkened steel, dripped with the blood of his enemies. He was a towering figure, clad in worn leather and furs, his face obscured by a wild mane of black hair and a thick beard that was flecked with frost. His eyes, however, were sharp and alert, gleaming with the cold fury that had driven him through the battle. He wiped the blood from his blade, the motion as methodical as it was indifferent. The men who had challenged him had been seasoned warriors, their skills honed through years of warfare, but they had been no match for Rhovan's ferocity. He was no lord, no knight with a coat of arms and a code of honor. He was a killer, forged in the crucible of survival, hardened by the brutality of the world. And today, he had survived once again. The wind shifted, bringing with it the scent of something foul, something unnatural. Rhovan's grip tightened on the hilt of his sword as he turned his gaze to the far end of the pass. There, emerging from the shadow of the mountains, was a figure draped in tattered robes, its form twisted and unnatural. The air around it seemed to ripple with dark energy, and the ground beneath its feet blackened with each step. "Warlock," Rhovan muttered, his voice a low growl. The tales of these dark sorcerers were whispered in taverns and around campfires, stories of men who had traded their souls for power, who commanded forces that defied the natural order. Rhovan had never believed the tales until now. The warlock raised a skeletal hand, and the air around Rhovan thickened, as if the world itself was trying to crush him. His breath caught in his throat, and for a moment he felt the icy fingers of death closing in. But Rhovan was no stranger to death. He had danced with it too many times to be cowed now. With a savage roar, he lunged forward, his sword slicing through the air. But the warlock was faster. A wave of dark energy surged from its outstretched hand, slamming into Rhovan and sending him crashing to the ground. Pain exploded through his body, but he forced himself to rise, his vision blurred with rage. The warlock was upon him in an instant, its eyes burning with malevolent fire. "You are strong, barbarian," the warlock hissed, its voice like the rustle of dry leaves. "But strength alone cannot save you." Rhovan spat blood onto the ground, his eyes blazing with defiance. "We'll see about that." With a feral snarl, he swung his sword in a wide arc, aiming for the warlock's neck. But the blade passed through empty air, the warlock dissolving into shadow. Before Rhovan could react, the shadows coalesced behind him, and the warlock's cold hand closed around his throat. Pain seared through Rhovan's body as the warlock's dark magic tore at his soul, and for a moment he thought he was done. But deep within him, something primal stirred, a well of rage and fury that had driven him through every battle, every hardship. With a roar that shook the mountains, Rhovan drove his elbow into the warlock's chest, breaking its grip. The warlock staggered back, its eyes wide with surprise. Rhovan didn't give it a chance to recover. With a mighty swing, he brought his sword down on the warlock's head, cleaving it in two. The warlock's body crumpled to the ground, the dark energy that had sustained it dissipating into the wind. Breathing heavily, Rhovan stared down at the corpse, his chest heaving with exertion. The battle was over, but the war was far from won. He knew that the warlock was just the beginning, a pawn in a much larger game. And if there were more like it out there, he would need to be ready. He wiped the blood from his blade once more and sheathed it, his mind already turning to the journey ahead. The Iron Spine was only the first obstacle. Beyond it lay the kingdom of Thar, a land torn apart by civil war, where lords and kings fought for power, and where the real battle awaited. Rhovan set his gaze on the distant horizon, where the sun had dipped below the mountains, leaving only darkness in its wake. He was a man without a banner, without a cause, but if the warlock's presence was any indication, the world was about to change. And in the chaos that would follow, there would be those who sought to carve out their own kingdoms, to forge their own destinies. Rhovan would be among them. But first, he would need to survive the night. With one last look at the battlefield, Rhovan turned and walked into the darkness, his step steady, his resolve unyielding. The edge of the blade had been tested, but the true test was yet to come.